From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Yes, indeed, we are right here in Milwaukee, center of the basketball world right now. Our Milwaukee Bucks, of course, won Game 5 in dramatic fashion, so up 3-2 in the series. We can win an NBA championship tomorrow night. Yeah, this is fun. This is a good time. You know, it happens every year. Somebody wins every year. And I don't care. And I don't even remember 2 days later. I don't remember who won, typically. So I understand the perspective of this. But from our perspective right here in Milwaukee, we're having a fine old time. It's going to be Bucks in 6. And speaking of perspective, I've got my view out the window here of Fiserv Forum. So I watch the game on the TV, and I look out over at Fiserv and pretend I'm there. And then, of course, the fireworks after the game. We're having a good time. We're having a fine old time. I think sports are a fine thing. A lot of my very liberal friends, very progressive, even radical socialist type lefties, a lot of them don't like sports. They find it to be a big waste of time, kind of beneath them. And that disappoints me. I think sports are a fine thing. Of course, the money in sports, all the millions and billions of dollars made by the players and by the so-called owners, yeah, that's all really gross and disgusting. But the game itself, the athleticism, the sport, the athletes are very impressive. And I think it's a pure and wonderful thing. It's fun being a fan. Sure, there's a lot of hype and money ruins everything, but I've never been one to define the sport by all the tangential foolishness. I'm able to really enjoy the games and the performances. So, yeah, I like sports. I'm a bit of a fan. I mean, I don't need to get into this. There have been volumes and volumes written on the psychology of sports, and I'll let people who know more about this do the explaining. But all I can tell you is I admire it. It's fun from a fan perspective when the city or the region or the state gets together and everybody's rooting for the same team. It's good, clean fun. I even like the trash talking. I discourage trash talking in any other aspect of life. But in sports, it's just part of the fun. And everybody can just sort of agree at the gate that, yeah, this is what we do. Of course, we talk a lot here about bipartisanship in politics and how I'm against it. Most people, and I'm very much in a minority there, most people, the majority of people would say it's a good thing when there are a couple of examples that are given. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan is sort of the classic example. That they were able to have a beer afterwards. You know, you debate in the Senate or in the House or go over and have fights in the White House and you have all these knockdown, drag-out political battles. But then afterwards, you'll go have a beer and you're all good friends. I guess that's not the worst thing in the world, but only if everyone is in a reasonable spectrum. And you and I have talked about this many times. You don't go out and have a beer with Hitler, to take the extreme example. And a very close comparison, we've been warned so many times never to use the Hitler comparison. Come on. When General Milley, the top chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the military, when he uses the Hitler comparison, I don't know, I think I have a pass. As I'm sure you've heard by now, General Milley is quoted in a recent book by, there's 2 or 3 of them out. It's not the Wolf book, or is it? Reporters from the Washington Post, reporters from New Yorker, I forget. Legit reporters, legit books, reliable sources have him quoted as saying, yeah, this is Hitler-esque, what the Orange Menace tried to do. Literally wanted to use the military, invoke the Insurrection Act, invoke the military to either stop or afterwards negate the election. So, yeah, bipartisanship, no. I'm not for it. And it's not a game. Nope, it's the exact opposite of a game. It's dead serious. So when we're talking about trash talking on one side of the coin and bipartisanship on the other, yeah, in politics, no, it's not just trash talking. It's not just fun. It's dead serious debate and the strongest rhetoric possible that in this case, the Republican Party, as it currently exists, must be abolished. That's just all there is to it. They're a danger. They're a danger to the nation. They're a danger to the world. Just this weekend, let's see, where am I reading this? HuffPost. Ex-Trump official calls the GOP America's #1 national security threat. This is not fun and games, you guys. Former Homeland Security official under Donald Trump says his own party is a national security threat. Miles Taylor, who served as the agency's deputy chief of staff and then chief of staff from 2017 to 2019, told MSNBC's Jason Johnson that he's not a political operative, just someone who works in national security. Quote, and the #1 national security threat I've ever seen in my life to this country's democracy is the party that I'm in, the Republican Party. Taylor said that on Thursday, adding, if my party retakes the House of Representatives in the next cycle, it's going to become a haunted house, and the ghoul and the specter haunting that house is going to be Donald Trump. Taylor called out House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, for continuing to pay homage to a twice-impeached presidential loser, and warned that if McCarthy becomes Speaker, it'll really be Trump's hand on the gavel. That notion, he said, should give all Americans pause. Yeah, McCarthy went over to Bedminster, to the Orange Menace property over there, had another little meeting just the other day. He has yet to name the Republican members of the committee to investigate January 6th. Speaker Nancy Pelosi maintains veto power over any of his appointments, which is appropriate. I mean, if he appoints people who are suspected in the crime, well, we can't have that. This Miles Taylor, by the way, has already come forward as the anonymous op-ed writer, that 2018 New York Times op-ed that described the chaos and the danger inside the White House, and that some or many people in the White House were actively sabotaging the president, seeing that he wasn't able to achieve his nefarious goals here. And we've only heard more and more similar stories since then. And, of course, the big bombshell of General Milley and him having to organize a resistance within the White House. He wants to start a war in Iran for political purposes. He wants to use the Insurrection Act and turn the American military on U.S. protesters, U.S. citizens. I mean, this is crazy. So, no, I'm not a bipartisan when it comes to these folks. Nope. There's no dealing with them. There's no talking to them. There's only defeating them. That's all there is. And that's why I like sports, to get back to this. That's where, you declare an enemy, you trash talk, but nobody's going to get killed. Nobody's going to get hurt. It's just good, clean, red-blooded American fun. So, enjoy sports. Yeah. The money is horrible. All of that is horrible. I agree. But that's not the fault of the sport itself. It's just got swept in with everything else that money and capitalism have ruined. I mean, it ruins everything it touches. It ruins art. It means I'm not going to love art? No, of course I love art. But the way it's produced, the way it's sold, the people who are able to appreciate it, and the way it's cheapened and corporatized for mass audiences, there are all sorts of horrible things you can say about the world of art as it pertains to the money. But generally speaking, the concept of art, the greatness, the beauty, no. I'm an art lover. For the same reason, I'm a sports lover. It's a beautiful thing. And we're having fun here in Milwaukee. So go Bucks. Bucks in 6. Here's something I want to mention. I know very little about Cuba, and we talked about it the other day. And I just want to just real quickly here step in and say, don't listen to me about Cuba. I'll tell you this much. People I respect, qualified, legit lefties that I respect, have a lot of good things to say about Cuba. Now, in my very limited knowledge, I look at a place that had one president for like 50 years. and then when he got sick and died, his brother for a couple of years. And then when he got too old, finally handed over to one other guy. None of them elected. Okay, I look at that and I say, well, I love small d democracy, so I'm not going to try to defend that. But other people, again, people I respect, point out the fact that citizens themselves are having these meetings and they have input and they vote on the local level. And there were this sort of great, very active democratic process to amend the Constitution recently. And the people had a say in that. I don't know. This is where my knowledge and expertise are not to be trusted. I'm not going to weigh in. I don't want you to listen to me. But I also don't want you to listen to people with an obvious agenda. Your standard right-wing corporate elite of this country have never liked the Cuban Revolution at all. It's the exact opposite of what they want. They like having all of their influence down there. They liked the Ricky Ricardo days when they had all their corporations and their influence and their casinos and their Ricky Ricardos down there. They loved that. And those are the days they pined for. And all the people who fled Cuba were of that general persuasion. So, of course, the Cuban refugees are going to be relatively more kind of right-wing. I think I've told you in the past about a friend of mine who lived in the Soviet Union when he was a young man. And as a result, because of what he experienced there, he's very much anti-socialist, anti-communist, and he's a big old right-wing Trumpster now, waving the red, white, and blue and singing the praises of capitalism because it's the so-called opposite of socialism, the way he understands it. But as things are happening in Cuba, I just wanted to step in here and say, don't come to me for big advice. Don't come to me for expertise. I'm not the guy. But there are definitely smart people out there that you can find. And please don't. This is the one thing I know for sure. This is the one piece of advice I can give you with great confidence. Please don't rely on corporate news, and especially on the right-wingers telling you how evil Cuba is, everything about it is terrible. It's way more complicated than that. And then on top of that, now we've got news. I guess there are U.S. fingerprints all over these protests, these recent protests. Reading now from mintpressnews.com, who I have not yet checked out. I can't vouch for this source. I'm not familiar with them. But I'll just read this little bit. Cuba was rocked by a series of anti-government street protests earlier this week. The U.S. establishment immediately hailed the events, putting its full weight behind the protesters. Yet documents suggest that Washington might be more involved in the events than it cares to publicly divulge. As many have reported, and there's a link to these many who have reported, the protests, which started on Sunday, were led and vocally supported by artists and musicians, particularly from its vibrant hip-hop scene. For those new to the issue of Cuba, the protests we are witnessing were started by artists, not politicians. This song, Patria Vida, powerfully explains how young Cubans feel, and its release was so impactful, you will go to jail if caught playing it in Cuba. That's a quote from Florida Senator Marco Rubio, referencing a track by rapper Yatul. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. So that's what Marco Rubio has to say. We know where he is on Cuba. Because he's one of these guys from a rich Cuban family who got ousted, or they escaped with their lives when, with the revolution. So we know where he is. He's the poster boy of all that. Continuing to read here. Both NPR and the New York Times published in-depth features about the song and how it was galvanizing the movement. The hip-hop song that's driving Cuba's unprecedented protests, ran NPR's headline. The artist himself led a sympathy demonstration in Miami. But what these accounts did not mention was the remarkable extent to which Cuban rappers have been recruited by the American government in order to sow discontent in the Caribbean nation. The latest grant publications of the National Endowment for Democracy, an organization established by the Reagan administration as a front group for the CIA, show that Washington is trying to infiltrate the Cuban arts scene in order to bring about regime change. A lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. NED co-founder Alan Weinstein once told the Washington Post. NED, again, National Endowment for Democracy. For instance, one project entitled Empowering Cuban Hip-Hop Artists as Leaders in Society states that its goal is to, quote, promote citizen participation and social change and to raise awareness about the role hip-hop artists have in strengthening democracy in the region, unquote. Another, called Promoting Freedom of Expression in Cuba Through the Arts, claims it is helping local artists on projects related to democracy, human rights, and historical memory. God, that's Orwellian. And to help, quote, increase awareness about the Cuban reality. This reality, as President Joe Biden himself stated this week, is that the Cuban government is an authoritarian regime that has meted out decades of repression while leaders only enrich themselves. All right. I just wanted to point you to this. I'm being a little wishy-washy here because I think all of us need to confess our own level of ignorance when it comes to important issues. I don't have full, confident knowledge of the real deal about Cuba, okay? I can see which people are taking what side, and it gives me a little bit of a notion, okay? So when I hear something about Reagan's National Endowment for Democracy, and when I hear quotes from Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, I get a pretty good idea. And then when I hear those on the left who I respect saying, hold on, wait a minute, this is way more complicated. There are levels of democracy in Cuba on a basic citizen level. And this is not opinion, this is just fact. As I pointed out, let me see, I'm going to check back. Did I post about this? I think I posted this on Facebook recently. Let me just go back and check. Oh, yeah. Joe Biden in that speech called Cuba a failed state. A failed state? No. Cuba ranks well above average, like high on the rankings in things like literacy and healthcare. And remarkably, they are middle of the road even economically. Even though they're a small, poor country, and they've had this horrible blockade, these sanctions enforced by the United States for decades. And even with that huge disadvantage, they still come in sort of middle of the pack on all economic rankings. So they are far from a failed state. That doesn't even come close to describing them. That's a political statement. So I felt the need to mention Cuba again because I mentioned it the other day. I may have said things that were outside of my base of knowledge. I think I probably did. I just want to encourage you to not get caught up in the jingoism of the topic because that's definitely happening. And here's where, I often defend the Democrats when my comrades want to say, oh, the Republicans and Democrats, they're all just the same. Bunch of corporate thieves. And I come to the defense of Democrats often. It's like, you guys, yes, I'm not a Democrat. No, I don't defend them, but you can't lump them in with Republicans. As we've already talked about, they're an existential threat to the planet. They're trying to literally kill democracy in this country. No, I'm not going to put Democrats and Republicans in the same boat. In this case, however, specifically when it comes to Cuba, yeah, most Democrats are right in there with them. They're right in there condemning everything about Cuba. You try to say anything fair-handed about Cuba, just ask Bernie Sanders. Lord mighty, you get in a lot of trouble. So that's why I bring it up. I just don't want you to get caught up in the so-called common wisdom, when in this case Democrats and Republicans in Washington are kind of on the same page. They have the same talking points. Oh, here's something that happened over the weekend. What's the deal here? So, you may have heard that the Democratic legislators from Texas, who left the state in order to deny a quorum to their Republican colleagues in Texas, right? I mean, you know this story. Texas Republicans wanted to pass these draconian, horrible voter suppression laws. The Texas Democrats said, we can't stop you, so we're going to leave and deny a quorum, and that way you can't pass it. So you heard that story. So they go to Washington to plead their case with the federal legislators. Say, look, we at the state level, we can't stall forever. The Republicans have the numbers because of gerrymandering mostly, and they have the power to do this. We're coming here to please, we're begging you, do something on the federal level. Right, okay, so that all happens late last week. Well, it turns out 3 of those Texas Democrats tested positive for COVID. All of them double vaxxed. But again, it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated. You can test positive and you can spread it. So you got to be damn careful. And Kamala Harris met with these legislators. And then Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States, takes a little innocent visit over to Walter Reed Hospital on Sunday. And the White House calls it a routine appointment. Oh, just a routine doctor's appointment. Let me ask you, when's the last time you had a routine doctor's appointment on a Sunday? And not only is it on a Sunday, it's a routine doctor's appointment that wasn't on your schedule, wasn't on your calendar. You just decided at the very last second, you know what? It's Sunday, and even though I haven't made an appointment, and even though it's not on my calendar, and of course there are lots of people, if you're Kamala Harris, who are interested in your calendar, and they keep pretty close tabs of that thing, let's just go over to Walter Reed for a routine doctor's appointment. Come on. Come on. The appointment is unrelated to the vice president's meeting last week with Texas Democratic lawmakers who have since tested positive for COVID-19. CNBC is reporting that as fact. Actually, it's just the press release from the White House. Simone Sanders, senior advisor and chief spokesperson for Harris, said Saturday that the vice president and her staff at the meeting were not at risk of exposure to the virus. All right. Why the hell else do you go to Walter Reed on a Sunday at the last minute? Come on. Now, she's double vaxxed. I'm not causing any panic. I'm sure she's going to be fine. But here we go. Just be straight with us. Just be straight with us. Come on. Oh, speaking of the voter rights thing and the voter suppression, that's not looking good. Let me give you the update as I understand it. There's very little hope at this point that either of the 2 bills, H.R. 1, the For the People Act, I guess they call it, that's the big one, and then the kind of smaller but still important bill, the John Lewis bill, they're calling it, the one that props up the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It looks like both of them are really stalled to a point where nobody's very confident, because they require the end of the filibuster, or at least what they call a carve-out. They've done this, obviously they do it for budget purposes. That's where they get this reconciliation thing. You can carve out certain issues that don't require the 60-vote filibuster override. So there's been some talk about, well, at least let's get a carve-out for these very important constitutional voting rights issues. And I guess once or twice, maybe the 2 senators that are the thorn in our side here, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, I guess every once in a while they'll kind of, people will read the tea leaves and think, oh, well, maybe he said this one little quote that, maybe he'll be open to a carve out. It's just not looking good. And it's got to happen before the 22 midterms. And if we don't get some fixes in place, then the Republicans have a very good chance of retaking the House in the midterms. And that we just can't have that. We just can't have that because they are the nationalist, fascist, white supremacist party. They want to kill democracy. They are an existential threat. I can't say this enough, and I can't say it strongly enough. We got to get this through our heads that we are facing imminent danger as a nation, as a democratic entity. We're facing an existential threat from this fascist party. So now there's talk about putting some voting issues, some voting rights issues, into the Democrats' infrastructure bill. We got two of those. Those are the two things we've been following. We've got the voting rights on one side. We got the infrastructure on the other. Each of those sides has two separate bills. And none of it is in the bank yet. We don't even know if either or both of these infrastructure bills are going to pass. We have the smaller one, the so-called bipartisan one. They're still dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and people are threatening, trouble. The one the Democrats are doing alone. A couple of weeks ago, we were hearing pretty promising headlines about how the Democrats have negotiated this among themselves and have come to an agreement. It looked like it was going to happen. But now the latest reporting I've heard over the weekend is that's not even a sure thing. But I can't remember her first name. What is her first name? Nancy Carroll, senator from Minnesota, ran for president. Jesus, I can't remember her first name. Amy, that's it. Amy Klobuchar. She was quoted over the weekend saying that they're going to try to put some of this voter rights language into the so-called human infrastructure bill. She said it won't be as good as what's already on the table, but maybe it's something. But then right away people pointed out, we'll go back to this parliamentarian thing. Remember back in the COVID bills when the Senate parliamentarian said, oh, no, you can't put minimum wage in there. It's against the rules. And remember, we had that big discussion. It's only the parliamentarian. It's only a Senate rule. It's not constitutional. It's not law. The senators could have just thumbed their nose at the parliamentarian and said, you know what? We're going to do it anyway. What are you going to do? Nothing you can do. You're just the parliamentarian. So we can have that whole fight again. And the parliamentarian might say, no, you can't put the voter stuff into the infrastructure bill, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't meet the requirements for reconciliation, blah, blah, blah. And we get into all that again. What are we going to do? And all the while, the East Coast is flooding, the West Coast is burning. The whole damn country's either on fire or drowning. And we got billionaires flying to space and nobody's doing a single damn thing about climate crisis. So happy Monday, everybody. And tomorrow night it's the Bucks going to win a championship, and we're all going to have a good time watching that. Oh, Lord. You know I love you. Fight the fight. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm Charles Bursell.